So we might now get into the live section, and we'll hand it over to Mark Fogarty. Mark has been working in the renewable industry for decades. We feel very fortunate that he's involved here in Walcha in our project, and he is with our team compiling the community submission on behalf of the Voice for Walcha. But he's looked at many EISs, and we look forward to him giving us a brief comment of what he's found so far. So thank you, Mark.
How's that? I might just open up by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Dungati people. I'd also like to acknowledge the two gentlemen to my left who've given up their time, I think, to be here. This is pretty, I think, inspiring stuff. I think it demonstrates the importance of this, of where this project and things is up to. I've had the pleasure of a number of engagements with Adam. All of them, I think, have been very cordial, and I think some of them as far back as Summer Ranch, and some of these have been very good outcomes. And the same with Barnaby's office. Lee, his Chief of Staff, has always made himself available, always done what he possibly can to sort of help and provide us with guidance, I guess, at that federal level. What I wanted to do today, just very briefly, I think, was to put into context, if you like, this EIS. Apart from Rachel, I've probably had my head under the bonnet of it more than most, looking where I think we take our concerns, where we keep the developer in check. I think most importantly, I mean, what EISs are about are about assessing the environmental impacts and putting in place, if you like, conditions and things that will, I think, take out the things that are too big an impact for communities, and I think control the others that probably can be managed. The EIS is the derivative of the Planning Act. Planning Act has been around since 1979. It was born back in the Rand days. That's how long it's been going. I think, like a lot of the legislation in New South Wales, it's past its use-by date. The Heritage Act or the National Parks Act. The government's done a good job, I think, with its Electricity Infrastructure Act, but I think the rest of the landscape there is no longer fit for purpose. So we'll see what happens, I guess, in March as to where that goes to. The Planning Act creates the principles and of course decides if the project should proceed. We've got a little way to go in that. I think the developer's getting a little bit excited, but I don't think we're going to see anything coming in a definitive way on this until probably the end of the year next year, if not in the middle of next year. There's quite a way to go in terms of the process as it goes back and forward between the developer, etc. As I said, it was started in '79. It's a bit of a hodgepodge. It's a bit like an old beach house, the '79 Act down on the coast. It's been added to with rooms, and it's got a labyrinth of all sorts of nooks and crannies and things in it that just don't make it anymore, I think, fit for purpose. And that pretty much brings us to the point of where this developer has, I guess, picked up on it. What we tend to see with so many of these projects is they've worked out how long a piece of string is. They've worked out how long the line in the sand is, and they just tend to take their development applications forward, just enough to keep, if you like, ticking the box. So it's very much a process-driven proposition. I've used the analogy here back in, I think, last year, and it's like a game of snakes and ladders. There's no snakes, they're just ladders. So what happens is the developers roll the dice and they land on a ladder and up they go. And ultimately, they keep their nose clean and do tick the boxes, then ultimately they get to consent. The problem is with that, of course, is that they're only just barely ticking the box. And that's what we've found in respect of this particular development. Vestas are no slouches. They're the developer. They've been around. They've been leading the wind industry for a long time. But they decided they're having a lot of problems. Their worldwide sales were down about 30% last year. So someone somewhere in a strategic planning session in an igloo somewhere way up in the Arctic Circle, and then they come from Denmark, has decided that they'd go upstream into development. So their boss, I think, sort of turned around and then said, well, okay, two things on that. Number one, you're not developers' bootlaces. You're turbine manufacturers and salesmen. That tends to be what we've got coming through in this development plan. Secondly, I don't want you burning any cash because we haven't got any. And we've got the blinker on, which means the first exit we can find off this freeway, we're out of here. So I wouldn't be surprised they've already sold it, they've got it moved on. Everyone's checking, all these developers are checking every car coming into town, hoping that Twiggy Forest is arriving with a big cheque and that someone's going to buy this, or Ken & Brooks or one of the others that are looking for these things. The problem we've got, and this is a drum we keep banging with the councils, is that we've had no strategic planning with this. Nobody has sat down. We've had a rollout of a res zone. No one's actually sat down and strategically said what makes sense to go where, what size makes sense, and when does it make sense. And we're starting to see that play out, particularly nationally, as I think the federal government and the state government begin to try and stumble along, trying to pull this energy transition together, and it's not looking pretty from where it sits. I think it's got a way to go before we start to see whether it's going to pay dividends. So it's already been alluded to. What we found here was, of course, the old developer trick was the divide and conquer, get in, gag the landowners with a not disclosure agreement, tie them down, and then divide the community on the basis that they can't necessarily speak. So we've seen that movie play out before. It's a movie that's played out in Crookwell, it's played out in Taralga, in the wind wars that occurred down there in 2014 and 2015-16. And those towns are still very much divided. That's the problem we're stuck with. The host landowners, things don't take a couple of generations for these things, I think, to wind back the clock on. So moving, I think, really, what that has meant, I think, that the developer, when we look at the EIS, has done the bare minimum, and we'll just go through some of the features of that. I think the biodiversity, Rach has already touched on that. That's a big issue. I mean, we're sitting here, UNESCO, Gondwana, we've got everything sitting on our doorstep. We've got a federal government that's now got to spring in its step on biodiversity, etc. So we're really looking at, I think, an EPCB Act, which is going to, I think, step up into the place and fill some of the voids. And our job, I think, really is to bring, I think, the feds to bear to look at those important issues. I won't go too much into those biodiversity issues, but I think importantly, if we look down the list of some of the issues we've got, thanks very much, Adam. Really, it's the cumulative impact is one that we highlight quite clearly on the website. Kate Durack has done a great job, I think, picturing that. The problem we've got with the developers is they're very selective in understanding that, and what we've seen in the res zones here, particularly in the southern res, is very much a congregation of projects down here. And unfortunately, most of them emulate from the same shop just over here in the main in the town, the Walcha Energy shop. So we've seen 700 megawatts, Winterbourne 700 megawatts with Ruby Hills, which is on the agenda. We've seen Brackendale, and we've talked about Topdale. As Adam will attest, we've got Kentucky, and we've got a whole lot of projects down here to Nundle that are sort of starting to manifest themselves. So one of the big issues that comes out is how do we measure the compounding effects of all of these projects, and particularly roads and traffic. That's one that worries me a lot. The number of truck movements, something 22,000 over the life of the project, of which 83% of them are heavy vehicle loads. We've got one road in, virtually one road out. How are we going to manage this project after project? So the cumulative impact of that is particularly important. The developer is very selective. They look at a study area from Glen Ennis to Nundle, Tamworth. We say, look, the more realistic, we really need to concentrate on the triangle, which is Uralla, Walcha, and then out to Bendemeer, because that, I think, will give us a competent study area that we can look at. We say that we reject the cumulative impacts that the developers put on the table. We say it needs to be independently assessed. We need someone to come in who understands these sorts of planning issues, and I think independently assesses what we think are the major issues. And as I said, transport is clearly one of those. I think a very dangerous situation of trucks on the roads, gravel, we've seen that up in Uralla with the UPC project that took place up there. The other issue we've talked about is decommissioning. So how are we going to, Rachel touched on this, but we talked about this, I think, back here in the middle of last year, but the mining sector stumps up on this. We really need developers to take ownership. This particular developer, Vestas, is ducking and weaving. As I said, they've got the blinker on. They don't intend to be here, so they're not making a commitment on how we're going to pull these down. So that the worry is that it's left with the community, it's left with the councils, etc., in the way we do that. We say there should be a substantial bond put forward on that, and I know that's on the table, but it has to happen clearly for this project, because these things are not small. They're 230 metres high. They're 800 cubic metres of concrete in the base of them. So we want some clear and I think definitive responsibilities and accountabilities for the developer, not the next developer after that, but the developer that's currently bringing this forward looking for consent. They're the people who should have the responsibility and the ownership on that. The Indigenous issue is another one. The very, very token approach to consultation, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. Non-Indigenous, they've brought in people who really don't understand the cultural heritage of the Dungari people. They don't really understand the surveys that need to be done. And it's just tick the box going forward. And the same with the consultation for the communities. It's again, if you look right the way across the landscape that they propose, there's been very little real consultation. There's been show bags, and there's been people, at the show down next to the bearded lady, or someone handing out brochures and promotional things, but there's been no real genuine engagement, and that's a real concern for us. And I know that Adam's picked up on that on other projects, certainly Ben Lomond and Oxley and some of these developers that come in and I think take advantage of that situation. I think the hazards, the fire, we're not going to be able to get in and deal with fire. We're not going to bring choppers in, or we're not going to bring bombing scenarios in to deal in and amongst turbines. So we've got a real problem in the national park there, as well as areas around the national park. One particular area that we're concerned on, and we won't have a good handle on this until next week, is the issue of noise. And so we've got big turbines, they're 6.2 megawatts. We've got potential for noise right the way across the Winterbourne site. And my worry is if it extends beyond that on a very quiet winter's night with a nor'easter blowing, where's that noise going to end up? It potentially can end up much further than the developer is telling us. And like most things they've done, they've actually underestimated. They've used modelling tools and things that don't demonstrate exactly what the noise is going to be. So we've seen this play out in Victoria in terms of Bald Hills and some other sites down there, and I think it's a real sleeper that we need to get our handle on. I think, Damien, I can keep going on. I'm going to be here and I'll leave my phone number around, but I think the bottom line with all of these issues in the EIS that we're finding is it's error loaded. They talk about things like neighbour benefits. There are no neighbour benefits. That's been, I think, dispatched here on the 31st of August last year. There's certainly a community fund, but that's taken that over. So those sorts of errors, I think permeate right throughout the document. I think, and again, just underestimate, as you would expect, the developers is they're looking for reasons to wind this thing down to be something that's not reality. And that's not acceptable because you guys are the ones that have got to live with this. And so I think our job is to highlight and to reject and to call for independent assessment as much as we possibly can. Damien, I'm going to hand it over from there to Adam. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Pretty hard act to follow that. At the start, I just want to thank Cameron, Damien, all the leading figures in Voices for Walcha for the very kind invitation to be here this evening. Obviously, I'm not your local member of parliament, so I am a guest here, but this project does slightly go into Northern Tablelands and the Uralla Shire, and it's great to see some Uralla Shire Council representatives here as well. And look, I guess I'm going to, usually on these sort of panels, Barnaby's the really loud and I'm usually the cautious one, but I don't know, the roles might get reversed a bit tonight. But I've tried to keep a very open mind on this project. I haven't had a lot to do with it in the past because it's been in another electorate. But in the last probably 3 to 4 months, I've taken a very keen interest in this project. And I've tried very hard to keep an open mind on it. I'm someone philosophically, like a number of the people that expressed their views, I'm not at all opposed to renewable energy developments per se or renewables per se. In fact, in many respects, I've been a very active and public encourager around certain projects that are in the right spots and have community benefits, acknowledging the fact that we are in the process of transitioning how we generate our electricity now and well into the future. But I spent the Christmas period reading through the EIS, such as it is. And I have to say, and I'm someone in a previous life that in my role at Gunnedah dealt with coal seam gas companies, mining companies, and in my role as a state member of parliament, I've dealt with my fair share of renewable energy companies. I've gone through a fair few EISs in my time and had to respond to them in writing, at public hearings, and at Independent Planning Commission hearings as well. Without doubt, this is the very worst EIS I have ever seen. It is woefully deficient in so many areas, and Mark made the correct observation that it is almost as if the developer is just trying to do the absolute bare minimum. And as I said to Damien on the phone, I can't work out, none of what has transpired in the last 4 or 5 months is the actions of a proponent that is genuine about getting a proposal up and across the line. And I don't say that lightly because I've seen a lot of cowboys in this industry, as there are in the mining industry and the coal seam gas industry. It might be a different product, but the behaviour of the companies tends to be the same. It is a divide and conquer. It is a secrecy. It is we'll game the system to get a project across the line because that's our ultimate goal. The good companies don't do that. They actually work with communities to design a project that the community is happy with, may not 100% support, but is comfortable with, can live with, and there's some shared equity in terms of shared benefits for the community. This is certainly not that. I have tried on 3 separate occasions to actually get a meeting with the proponents, with investors, with their representatives, and I have been unable, as a member of parliament whose project, their project does go into my electorate, and they have not responded. They have not spoken to me. They have not granted me a meeting, which I've never ever found that before. Now, I'm not precious. I'm not offended by it. But again, it goes to that issue of, are these people serious, or is this just a bit of a game to then offload it, see if they can game the system? I really cannot work it out. It is bizarre behaviour in the extreme. The EIS, some of those issues have been mentioned. The biodiversity and ecological assessments are error-ridden, but also they're conducted in a period of time when we were experiencing the worst drought in living memory. I'd say that's been done deliberately. There are still significant questions about noise issues, which haven't been modelled thoroughly, I don't think, in my view. Simple issues like logistics, transport, bringing the components in that will inevitably come in from the Port of Newcastle. Sure, you can get them up the New England Highway. That's what we did to get them into Glen Innes for those two projects. But how do you then get them off the New England Highway into Walcha? And as Mark said, there's one road in, one road out. And you know that road better than me, but it's not exactly conducive to lots of heavy vehicles and interacting with caravans and other people driving. And how do you overtake? And the bridge there at Walcha Road. Like, there's all sorts of issues that, again, go completely unanswered. The 150 million litres of water, where's that coming from? Where are they finding that water? Where are the licenses? Oh, look, I could go on and on. It is extraordinary, the gaps that exist in that proposal. And if I was some of these experts that actually they engaged to put that EIS together, I'd hang my head in shame, because they'd be lucky if they get another gig, because some of the work that they've done, and I'm not an expert, but even I as a layperson can see the obvious flaws, which probably explains why this EIS was held onto by the Department of Planning for over 12 months before it was publicly released, because it was probably even worse when they submitted it rather than what they've released. And then to make the comment publicly that it's a fluid document is extraordinary, because it isn't a fluid document. The EIS represents essentially the company's development application, as if they were trying to build a house and lodging a DA with the local council. Sure, there's a process that Mark knows where the department takes the submissions and goes back and forth, and they can fine-tune things, but that is the substance of their proposal. I just don't think these people are serious, and I'm really proud to see this community call that out for what it is, and in my view, stick together to it's not about being anti-something, it's about actually asking what are common sense, logical questions. And the fact that you are in a position where you are still seeking information on the most basic of issues tells me that the proponents have failed. They have failed, because I have seen good companies operate to get projects across the line. And you don't have these meetings when you're dealing with professional people that are committed to a region, working with a community, not against it, supplementing the existing amenity and industry in a community, not supplanting it. You don't see that, because they work for years to develop, support, social licence, and develop a project which the community, as I said, can support or live with. And for those reasons, I think this project should fall. It's another interesting observation that at your last meeting, the company didn't send any representatives. Again, I don't understand why. And the fact that they haven't adequately engaged with this organisation, this community, and the Aboriginal community, which I know also feel very shortchanged by their process. So again, I would add my voice to say that you're on the right path. Get your submissions in. This company, I don't think, is in it for the long haul at all. Time is this community's friend in terms of this project, in my view. 50 individual submissions to the Department of Planning triggers an automatic referral to the Independent Planning Commission. Mark knows that that'll probably add another 12, 18 months to the process at least. The IPC will come up here, they will hold public hearings into this proposal, they will engage their own independent experts to assess what the proponent's putting forward, and so on and so on. Most of the time, proponents get the message and walk away, and by you being here tonight, you're sending, I think, a very strong message. So I think it's pretty obvious. I on a whole raft of measures, I cannot bring myself to support this project. I think it is a poorly put together project. That being said, there could be the potential for a good proponent and a good project to be and receive community support here, but not this one, and not these particular individuals who are doing the developing for, as Mark said, for the very first time. So again, stick together, get your submissions in, and strap yourselves in, because I think this company is about to get a very rude shock. We are not a welcome mat for them to walk over. We will accept good projects in our region, but we will be the ones that determine the nature of and the scope of those projects, not proponents. And I think if you stick together and this project falls, then it'll be like a domino effect on, what's his name? Mark, that fella, all these other speculative tyre kicking jobs that I see on the map, because this, anyway, look, I think you get the gist of it. It's got some problems all over it. I've been talking to my contacts in the Department of Planning. They'll never say it publicly, but I'm happy to say it in this forum. There's an acknowledgement that this project has hairs absolutely all over it. So my strong suggestion to you is, 1, well done. 2, don't take a backward step. Stand strong, express your views, put in your submissions. And if you stick together, I can guarantee you, if you stick together as a community, people power will prevail. It always has, and it always will. I fundamentally believe in that, and that's always been the case in our region. So well done, and keep going.
Well, I'm going to break the mould. I'm going to stand up. No, this one works. Look, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for being here, and welcome Adam. Thank you very much for coming down. I'd like to thank all those who've put so much effort into organising this today. I'd acknowledge the Mayor who's here today, and all of you who've taken time out of your evening to come in here. Our family was offered the opportunity to have wind farms. We said no, and I suppose the question is why? Well, one of the first reasons for me is philosophically, I just don't believe they supply cheap power, and our nation needs to be as strong as possible, as quickly as possible, and therefore we don't do it by making ourselves weak. So why do Vespers do this? They do it for one reason and one reason only. They make money. That's why they do it. They're not here to save the planet. They're not trying to go to heaven. They're here to make money. How do they make money? Well, they make money by reason of a whole heap of incentives that have come from both federal governments and state governments. But more importantly, they have a corrupted market which they sell into, which is a power market that buys power in 5-minute blocks. Now, I wish I could sell you my car in a 5-minute block. It goes really well down the Moombi Range, really well. It's just getting back up the other side that has a problem. And because of this corrupted market, these things become viable, which otherwise, if they had to stand on their feet for 24/7, 365 days a year, they would not last. It would not stand up, because you have to provide dispatchable power. You have to provide baseload power, because we have to make sure this nation is strong. If we don't make sure this nation is strong, we will fall. We will fall. And that is why the primary reason I have a problem with this. Now, I want to go through a couple of other things that are interesting. So why do Vespers do it? Why? The EIS was a total joke. It was just contemptible. They treat you as mugs. They think you're fools. They think you're bumpkins. They think, you can lift heavy things and lick between your fingers, but that's about where it stops, right? So why are they doing it? Because they believe the politics is on their side. They believe the politics is on their side. Now, I don't know much about a lot, but I know a hell of a lot about politics. Right? I'm good at politics. And what we've got to do is make sure that they understand the politics is moving, and it's moving away from them. Now, that's up to you. That's up to you, and I can tell you, I'll give you some war stories and tell you how you can do it. So we're up against a battle against fully imported, foreign-owned wind farms that will have a life of around about 25 years at best, 25 years. And then I can tell you one thing. As sure as I'm standing here, I'm going to tell you one thing. That technology will be so out of date, it will be ridiculous. It will be antiquated. I believe by then, personally, I believe that nuclear power will be in. And there'll be something that will fit in this room that'll do the job of thousands of wind turbines. So you can basically say they'll all be out of a job. But the problem you're going to have is the wind turbines are still going to be on your place. That's going to be a big problem. Now, I had a very senior person from the government, from the government, senior bureaucrat, who's also a lecturer in law. And he came to see me, and I thought, well, he's going to lobby me to tell me, because he was involved with wind farms, how evil I am, that I didn't support them. And he came in to tell me how he had real concerns that farmers didn't actually know what they're signing themselves up for. Their legal ramifications they didn't know. He ran through a couple. You probably get about $30,000 a wind turbine a year, maybe, about that. I'm going to assure you that's not even going to come close to the cost of dismantling them when they get to the end of the period. And because as they become more obsolete, technologically obsolete, the requirements and the return from them is going to go down. Now, if you've got a surety, and some people say, I've got a surety from a bank for a couple $100,000, that's not even going to get close. The cost of dismantling one right now is vastly dearer than the cost of putting it up, between $500,000 and $700,000, and that is his numbers, not mine. $500,000 and $700,000 a tower. And that is not Vespa's problem. That's your problem. That's your problem. So if these things need to be pulled down, if someone comes in with an order and says that thing is a risk, pull it down, problem become a mu. Monkey on your back. And then you got another small issue no one's considered. The Valuer General for the Stamping Act, the Stamp Duties Act, values it on the market sale price or what the Valuer General believes it to be worth, taking into account fixtures. Guess what's a fixture? The wind tower. That's a fixture. So you go to sell your place for $10 million, $5 million, but then they come in and they say, hang on, you got about $10 million worth of fixtures on your place too. You got to pay the buyer has to pay the stamp duty on that as well. Then the buyer says, I don't want to buy it in that case. So, well, that's your problem, mate. That's why you got yourself $30,000 a year. So these are the other issues that are coming into place. Fire ratings. These things catch on fire. Go down. There was one on fire the other day down at Canberra. They wear out like any other piece of machinery, and they catch on fire. So, of course, it's not a charity. People are going to say, catches on fire, therefore the council needs a fire rating on it, and you got to pay it. Not Vespa's, you. Because it's basically your asset, which they have used. Now, what happens when they sell? Because these things, they flick it. They're carpetbaggers. They flick it to another company. Who you got an agreement with? Who's your agreement with then? They've just flicked it off. Vespa's can see the asset. They've got it. They've made their money. Remember, they're only there to make money. And they flick it to the Barnaby Joyce investment company. And I've got some fool who wants to buy it off me. And I make some money on the way through. Next thing you know, you've got something on your place. You don't quite know who owns it. These are the issues. These are just on the technical issues, even if you're for it. And you know what this guy said to me? He said, the problem is, Marnie, Vespa's have some really good solicitors. They've got top-notch solicitors. And out in the country, Barney, you got Barnaby Joyce and Co. or Billy Bloggs, and they're not even close to the acumen of what people are going to be up against. So be aware of that. I've seen these arguments before, where the politics goes one way and then the politics goes back. Mary River Dam up near Gympie. Everybody wanted it until everybody started turning up protesting about it, and then they realised it was going to change votes. Then people didn't want it. I saw a better one than that, the live cattle dispute. When the live cattle dispute first started, even my side, Tony Abbott, supported the banning of the live cattle. They all did. Thought it was a great idea, really good idea. Until they started meeting people from the Gulf who were going broke. Until they started meeting ladies at Richmond with skin cancers all over them, who've lived basically a frugal life without any sort of benefit, lived out in the sticks. On the premise, there was a live cattle trade. Now, when those people turned up and said, "You have completely butchered my life. You have completely butchered my life," all of a sudden the Australian people's views changed. And they went from, "This is a really good idea to ban the live cattle trade," to "This is a really bad idea to ban the live cattle trade." Politics changes. Now, I know the EIS is a packet of poo tickets. Right? I know that, but you know what? All I know is that if we're going to win this, you have to change the politics. You have to make it seem like myself and Adam might lose our job. When Adam and I think we're going to lose our job, our radar goes up. And we start thinking, hang on, we might have to change our point of view. We might have to change our point of view. But what we do in all these things, whether it's Mary River Dam, whether it's live cattle trade, whether it's the Southeast Queensland, the coal seam gas, which I was also involved in trying to support the farmers there, what the biggest mistake cockies do, us do, I'm one, is we talk to ourselves in Walcha. We walk round Walcha, talking to each other. We know the people are on side. We know the people are off side. The community split down the middle. It's a schism. You know, one group sits in one corner of the pub. The other group sits in the other corner of the pub. These people go to that church. These people don't bother turning up anymore. You know, but you know who you got to talk to? You got to talk to Macquarie Street. You've got to arrive on the Federation lawn at Parliament House. You know what really scares politicians? What really scares me as a federal politician? When I look out the front and there are a whole heap of people there and they're angry at me. That I worry about that. I like it when they like me. I don't like it when they're angry with me. And if you just keep the fight here in Walcha, you're going to lose. I'll tell you that right now. You lost. You can finish it. I've already told Peter Dutton tonight, sent him a video of you all being here and noting that, you know, just because you're here doesn't mean you're supporting or against wind farms. It just means you're here, but it means it's a big issue. So you've got to get organised, and there's no guardian angel that's going to come down and pick you up and look after you. There's no person behind you. It's you. You got to fix up your own problem. You got to fix it up yourself. How are you going to do that? You're going to get organised. You're going to talk to the people at Crookwell. You're going to talk to people at Ben Lomond. You're going to talk to people at Cattle Creek in Queensland. Cattle Creek, Queensland. You know, they talk about coal mine. There is more country in one wind farm in Queensland than all the coal mines in Australia. That cover all the coal mines in Australia. Just one. So you talk to people at Cattle Creek in Queensland. You start getting organised with other people around Australia. Around Australia. Get the politics right. Yeah, we're all going to put in our stuff to the EIS, but that's not going to change it, ladies and gentlemen. Politics is going to change it. The reason this advantage is there is because it was created by politics. And the only way you can turn this back is going to be by politics. And the only person who can do that is not me, it's you. You have to do it. You have to get organised. So do you know the people down at Nundle? Do you know their names? Do you know who their organisation is? Do you know the people at Crookwell? Do you know the people down around Lake George? Do you know the ones at Cattle Creek? Do you know all these other people who are having exactly the same meetings as you're having here? Doing exactly the same thing. Do you know them? I reckon if you all turn up Macquarie Street, if you start organising yourself, other people will come along with you. And when you arrive at the front lawn of Parliament House in Canberra, it's going to be a very interesting day for Chris Bowen. That's going to be a really interesting day for Chris Bowen. I'm sure he'll come out and talk to you like hell. So we've got to also remember so we also have to understand that we'll run a campaign. I'm doing my bit. I have to acknowledge Vicky. Vicky is pathological. She's using the Daily Telegraph as your advertising venue. The most read article in the Telegraph. But that's shifting other people's opinions. So it's going to become more and more incumbent upon you. The other thing I don't like about this is it's just divided us up. I mean, it's hard for me because I've got really close friends who are going to make money out of wind towers. And we almost like we have to have two conversations. We have to have the conversation about everything else and then the conversation about this. But where I am is I've never been known for being too nuanced. So you got to say, is it right or is it wrong? Is it good or is it bad? Does it make my nation stronger or does it make my nation weaker? These things aren't even recyclable. They bury them. The blades, they bury them. That's what happens. It's just like the solar panels. They bury them. Even with the blades themselves, now with the change of blades, have gone from aluminium blades to a sort of a combination base blade, sort of a polymer sort of fiberglass type blade. When they fracture, when they get a structural fracture, predominantly by a number of lightning strikes, they just have to throw them out. So they have to actually pull the blade down and get rid of them. Now, they'll do that at the start when they're making money, but they won't when they're not. Even the wind towers themselves, when they first built them, they're about 3 megawatt wind towers, 2.5, 3 megawatt wind towers. Now they're up to 7. So the people with the 3 megawatt ones on, they're out of date. They're not going to fix up a 3 megawatt tower. It's over. You know where that megawatt tower's going to stay? Stuck on that person's place. Right there. When you go to the United States and Europe, you can see these. You know what happens when they are out of date? They just rust. I can take you to some in Australia right now, Northern Australia. They just walk away from them. And we can't afford for that to happen here. I'll tell you what, I want you to test Vespers out. Try them on this. Say, I will sign up to this deal as long as you say you are totally responsible for the decommissioning of them. And not just you. Make it an independent party. A bank guarantee that is that can't be negated, and that bank guarantee can be held there for the cost of whatever it is to pull down the wind tower. You know what Vespers will tell you to do? Go to hell. They won't do that. Because that means they won't make money if that happens. They'd rather pay you, 30 grand a year for a few years till they flick it. Then you can take it up with the next person who has the lease. See how you go arguing with them. There's these things that swindle on every side. It's a swindle on our power because our power is now in our nation dearer than it's ever been before. It's forcing our manufacturing overseas. We've got other countries breathing down our neck where we have to become as strong as possible, as quickly as possible. We can't do it because we don't have what we used to have as our strongest suite, which is cheap power. It's a swindle on districts because they come in here and just think they're bumpkins. EIS, I don't know. Get Myrtle at the front desk to write it. There you go. Get her, she'll send it off. Don't worry, Chris Bowen, he'll let it through. They'll all do it. The politics is on our side. It's a swindle on that. And it comes into our community and just drives a wedge right through the middle of us. So I hope in the end that no matter what, we don't let that wedge hurt us, because we're all going to live here. We've all been here for generations, and we want to stay living here. But if you don't, all I can do is I'll do my part, and make myself incredibly unpopular with a few people. That's all right. But I really say this: you have to get organised. If you can't, I'll leave it on this. If you can get this group and Nundle, and Ben Lomond, and Cattle Creek, and Crookwool, and Bald Hills down Victoria, Lake George, and if you manage to turn up on the front lawn at Canberra, their politics is going to come your way. It'll come your way. I'll close on this. I will close on this. I remember in the live cattle debate, arguing it and being the loneliest person at the start. I remember Tony Abbott sacking me as a minister and then re-employing me about 3 hours later, saying I was completely out of my league because I was a shadow for water, and then I was talking about live cattle, and I said, well, you're going to have to sack me. So he did, and then he re-employed me. And everybody was sort of outraged by it. But I remember giving a speech at Martin Place in Sydney. Place was packed. Martin Place was packed. And I thought I'll test them to see where they are. And I said, the live cattle decision was one of the stupidest decisions our nation ever made. And the crowd that went right down Martin Place started clapping. So the Australian people are not dopey. After a while, they get it. After a while, the penny drops. But that was after a long, hard task of turning this thing around. So I'm here in support, but what I'm saying to you, it's don't walk out the door here and think, oh yeah, job's done, go home, make a cup of tea. Otherwise, you're going to have 550 wind towers through here. I'm going to have 40 of them that I can see from my front veranda, and it's just going to happen to us, and we're going to get run over. And I don't like getting run over.
Thank you very much to the three gentlemen to my left. I'd just like to reinforce the note. We're going to break into a Q&A now, and I do want to reinforce that Walcha is a great community. We are a community that comes together. So let's please be respectful in our questions. Let's be respectful towards each other. And know that this is just a speed bump in what will be and will continue to be a very, very successful district. So let's break into some questions. Who's going to kick it off?
Hello everyone, I'm Suella Tritton. I'm not actually from Walcha, I'm from the Burralong district in Armidale, northwest of Armidale, and we have a wind farm up there. I'm here to support you guys because of the cumulative impact and what it's going to do to your particular community, but also to all the rest of us that are living in this whole area. The three gentlemen up there have all told us pretty much what we all suspect and already know, and most of us, I would say, in this room are against what's happening. My question is, there seems to be a process to object to or make comment to on individual projects. And apart from driving all our tractors down and our loads of cow manure down and putting them on the lawn at Parliament House, is there a legal process where we can object to the cumulative impact that is happening to our district? Not just every single project. That's what we're here for today, is to object or make comment about this project, but what about the cumulative impact? There was a wonderful, that PDF is just amazing, as it shows not only the ones that are there, but there are a lot of others that aren't on that map that are being proposed. And it's just, as Barnaby said, we're going to get rolled over. And so we need to have that cumulative impact process. What is it? Because I don't understand what that process is, the legal process or the how do we object? How do we get that the cumulative impact over to the people who make the laws and who can make a difference?
That's a terrific question. I guess there's sort of three, as it stands at the moment, there's probably three main triggers. The planning system, as Mark said, is incredibly clunky and it's old and it's a sort of like a patchwork quilt. But there is a requirement in the legislation that cumulative impact be considered by the consent authority, whether it's the Department of Planning or the Independent Planning Commission. So when they look at a project, even though they're required to look at each individual project on its merits, they have to assess it in the context of what else is already... No, of what's already approved or built. So what happens is the last projects, or, I see Mr. Waring, whatever, has got 5 or 6 others on the drawing board. The problem is that they're likely never to get a go, because if other projects before them get approved, then essentially the region hits saturation point. But even before you get to that, there's physical constraints in terms of the transmission infrastructure. And that's one thing that's driving Vestas to push so hard, so quickly and so sloppily, is because the headroom of capacity on the existing transmission infrastructure is getting less and less, because other projects in other parts that use that transmission line are coming online. And so they're running out, because if they miss out on the existing transmission infrastructure, their only option then is the renewable energy zone transmission infrastructure, which is years away from being built. And then with that, the problem with that is for them is that under the renewable energy zone legislation, there is an ability for Energy Co to refuse connection for any project that doesn't have social licence, that doesn't have the support of the community. So that's the other trigger to address cumulative impact, social licence, but also the strategic planning aspect that Mark is spot on about is the RES essentially. So I guess, I don't know if that sort of clarifies it, but there's those are the triggers that exist at the moment. Mark's got it.
Add to that a bit. I think Adam is a very good answer, but I just want to pick up on that point, because this is the one I think most people in the New England, and I've had this conversation with Adam, I think is subject to his March scenario, but I think what's going to really happen after that, we're really going to end up with a whole lot more projects that are coming. I mean, you cut one head off, another two grow. And I think Johnny Pete feels down the back here for New England, and I think what we've been doing is pushing and trying to get on to Robert Bell is here, and I think Eric and Copeland, Sam Copeland in Armidale, and really saying we want to see the councils back into driving the strategic planning process. Had this been the case here, and had not the state significant development provisions of the Planning Act prevailed, then Eric and his team here would have had a far greater say, I think, as occurs in Europe, to make a decision on what should go where and how big it should be, what sort of technology and when it should happen. That's what should happen. That's what councils do. They look after planning. They look after land planning, and that's, I think, a very good question you've asked, and I think we all should be looking to take up Barnaby's point, is take this thing out of the planning system and demand that we have some sort of independent review on this cumulative impact proposition right the way across the New England. It's going to make Adam and Barnaby's job easier, and I think if we can get this right, and I firmly believe that council should be in the driving seat on doing this.
Just a final addendum to that. As you know, I wish that I had the removal of laws that apparently the renewable sector has had removed on their behalf, because they've just basically had the slate cleaned for them and they can do whatever they like. If I tried to do the same thing on our place, I'd be hauled up before an environment court as quickly as anything. Like, you can't just go in and wholesalely clear around, through the bush. Well, but they can. But here's the one thing you got to watch out for. When Chris Bowen talks about your $20 billion that you're putting towards transmission lines, that's not the big transmission lines like where there already are. You're going to get a whole heap new of these. And that's just $20 billion, and then the private companies coming on the top of that put about $80 billion towards it. So you're going to get about $100 billion worth of transmission lines. And you think, well, what's that about? Well, guess where they're going to go? They're going to go to your renewable precincts. And guess whose land they're going to go across? Yours. So if you can't see the wind towers, then you're going to have to deal with the transmission lines going across your property, because they've got to get the power out. Now, here's the other part of the trick. After you forked out as a taxpayer for the $20 billion, I wish I'd put that into our roads, into the $20 billion, they get a deemed rate of return on the asset that they built that's been also subsidised by the taxpayer. So they get deemed rate of return. I think one of them was like 14%, or no, it might have been about 12%. They borrow their money at like 3%. So they make money without moving any power. They make money just by borrowing the money at a cheaper rate than what the power user, has to pay on the deemed rate of return on the asset that they even used taxpayers' money to build.
On that transmission line stuff, the federal government and the state government have put a serious commitment into transmission lines. So it goes this way. But the problem we all seem to feel is that once you let this EIS through, it's like opening the door, and the cumulative effect can be terrible. So if we think 120 towers are in the wrong place, using the unfairly smashing a little community like ours and then trashing our wonderful landscape, what's 800 towers doing? So Adam, I think I'm liking the way you're talking. So how do we cope with something that big?
Well, the point is that with this particular project, Ross, as I said, it's completely deficient. And if you stick together and fight it, like dominoes, it works both ways. If this community allows this project to proceed, then yeah, you do open the door. But likewise, if you stick together and this project falls, which I believe it will, then you control a bit more of the terms of engagement if other companies want to come along, because they know what they're dealing with this community. It's a smart community, and Barnaby's dead right. Some of these companies would have a view, well, we need to generate electricity. This joint's near a big transmission line. These people don't have much industry going on. They'll probably either love us or they won't have a clue what we're talking about. You knock over this project, which is being developed by Vestas, as Mark said, one of the biggest in the world, and suddenly any other company that wants to think about coming to Walcha will either think twice or actually do the right thing by this community and treat you with respect and engage with you and come up with a project which the community is happy with. And there are ways to thread the needle and do it, because it's been done before. There's plenty of bad examples as well, but there are some good ones when communities are treated with respect and treated, work together in a partnership. So that would be where I come from. That would be my observation. Is this is the litmus test, right? We knock over this one, and then you control the terms of engagement from here going forward.
I might just add to that. I think it's a good question, and I think I'm not wanting to. But I endorse what I think Barnaby's saying. I think this is Bowen's problem. Bowen's problem is really he's got a small amount of money in powering Australia. He's got 28,000 kilometres or whatever it is of transmission that he's got to try and roll out, and we all pay for that. And so you have a look down south at the moment. You've got Snowy 2, which, whether you like it or not, has been a debacle financially. And you've got HumeLink that comes out that connects Wagga all the way up to Goulburn. It crosses over 376 kilometres of property, and the landowners down there, I think, have taken exactly the right stance. They've said underground it or don't bring it here, and I think that's got to be the proposition. It costs more for sure, but I think that's the sort of stance that's got to be taken. This is what Merkel found in Germany when she tries to shut down the nukes there, and she needed to bring power from the Baltic down. And I think transmission is going to be the battle, certainly for here. And I think we've got to be ready for that. But as my two friends here have been saying, we stand together on that, then I think there's a very good chance. We stand together with the HumeLink people, a very good chance that we can get a much better outcome of that. Yeah,
and the other point is, with Barnaby and I was just talking about it, underground it, and I think they will win that battle. Or you say, well, if you want a good environmental outcome, we've got no shortage of national parks you can plough your transmission lines through. That's public land, and surely it's much easier for government and a developer to deal with one landholder, being the Crown, rather than dealing with 50 landholders or 60 landholders being individual cranky landholders, farmers, whoever they are, and do it in those terms. And when you look at the National Park Estate, the State Forest Estate, the travelling stock reserves, the Crown reserves, everything, all the public land, there's plenty of space to put those transmission lines on, whether you want to underground them on Crown land or put them above ground. There's plenty of room, and that again should be the terms of the terms of the initial discussion, and that should be the line which we say we won't cross. It's been interesting to observe what's happened out at Dubbo, and they've got a huge range of largely solar, very few wind, mainly solar out around Dubbo, and that's been an interesting for me to watch where the community arguments started, or the community discussion started, and where it's finished. And pretty much where it's finished is pretty like the Hume link, and it will be the same here, where everyone will say, no, you want to impose this stuff on us, you put it on public land, and you put it through these state reserves and national parks if it's going to be such an environmental windfall. Essentially, you put your money where your mouth is, rather than impose it on private landholders who have bought this freehold, pay rates, increase stamp duty, put it on public land.
Thanks, Damien. Andrew Burgess from Walcha. Just a quick question about the renewable energy zone. Is the Winterbourne project part of the renewable energy zone or not? And just as a comment, the place to put all the broken blades and burnt out turbines is in the empty coal mines.
Thanks, Andrew. The simple answer is no, it's not. In their EIS, they indicate that they intend to connect to the existing Transgrid transmission infrastructure. It's interesting, the Department of Planning or the IPC cannot grant consent to any project that doesn't have a connection agreement with a transmission line. So the company has not yet signed an agreement at all with Transgrid, and I've confirmed that with Transgrid. And the problem for Vestas is that headspace of transmission on the existing line is closing, and it's closing quickly. So when I said earlier that time was on your side and time was your friend, I neglected to mention that fact. So I'm glad you asked that question, because that's the critical thing here. It's not part of the res. They're proposing to connect to the existing transmission infrastructure.
Question, going back to the political angle, we're going to be busy here tonight with EIS submissions, but we are mindful that we need to be involved in that political space as well. Tanya Plebisek has recently set some really positive goals around biodiversity conservation. We'd ask, how is that compatible, or how is this project compatible with these goals that she has set? So how do we engage Tanya Plebisek and ask her to be good for her word on this project?
Well, I engage with Tanya Plebisek every Monday morning at 7:10 on Sunrise. Six, and Vicky, I'm pinching this off Vicky, 6 of the animals that apparently Tanya wants to protect are on the edge of the national park, which the wind towers are going to kill. So I don't quite know how, but look, don't look for honesty in politicians. Look for politics, right? And Tanya, what you have there is the dynamics of an inner western suburb viewpoint. So the sort of Annandale politics, where they feel righteous about driving this agenda. Other people capitalise on that, such as the proponents here, who can make a very good buck out of it and then flick the deal, and flip the deal as they will do, exactly what they will do. But you'll never get Tanya Plebisek arguing for wind towers in her electorate, nor will you ever get her arguing for them in Bronte or Balmoral, even though they could go on Middlehead. They'd go very well on Middlehead. North Head would be an ideal site for them, and you'd be able to feel righteous as you went across on the ferry looking at the wind towers. This is the hypocrisy of politics. See, it's righteous as long as they don't have to put up with it, because one could go near the Archibald Fountain. It would be beautiful. You have the Archibald Fountain and a wind tower, right? But of course they won't do that. So, and that's why we've got to pick up the tempo. We've got to pick up the tempo. We've got to pick up the heat. We've got to make sure that we're organised, because Tanya is not going to change for us. Tanya is locked in. She's locked in. Bowen, he is I mean, if he's not in the weights room, he's dancing around that bloody that dispatch box, showing everybody how big his muscles are and talking about wind towers. But they're locked in. They're locked in. The only thing that's going to change them is if they think they're going to lose their job. So you create the racket and you get the support of other people, and you'll find them. Well, once you get away from the inner suburbs of Sydney, once you start going out into towards the black towns, you're going to start finding supporters. You'll start finding lots of supporters again. And that dynamic changes politics. But see, what people think is we'll get Tanya up here and all of a sudden she'll have an epiphany and she'll froth at the mouth and say, I was wrong, and, and everything will be fixed. That ain't going to happen.
On that, though, it's a good question, Cameron, because under law, the EPBC Act is a very powerful piece of legislation, and it can be used to override any state-based legislation. So theoretically, which I don't believe will be the case, but let's say worst-case scenario, this thing gets some sort of approval. Theoretically, the feds can come in over the top and squash the consent through the EPBC Act, because a threatened or endangered species, which is covered under the EPBC Act, will be affected. It's been used politically in the past to stop certain controversial projects for political reasons, to Barnaby's point, but I do think that is an avenue worth exploring, given what you've already put together, i.e. the deficiencies in the EIS around biodiversity and the significant number of threatened or endangered species that live in this district. So I wouldn't write it off. I think it's a valid line to pursue concurrently along with making the submissions into the EIS. And it is, in a way, a bit of a salvo or a last gap measure if the initial attempt through the EIS to prevent it falls, if that makes sense. But you can run both arguments at the same time, because it's not unprecedented that act has been used to squash projects, even when state and territory governments have approved projects. And some of those have been used to stop renewable projects as well.
So I'll play devil's advocate here. In light of the not using, for example, this or any of these renewable energy projects, what is an alternative, just any other alternative to, for example, this wind farm, and two, why under legislation based in 2020 in New South Wales does the Minister for Energy, who is currently member for Hornsby, not required to come to the area to do an evaluation of the area, look around it, but also all they need to do in that legislation is lay out what needs to happen for the community. For example, Aboriginal consultation. That's one of the things. So why does the member not have to even come? And two, what is an alternative?
Yeah, good question. So that would be true if this particular proponent was seeking to be granted consent under the renewable energy zone. They are not. So none of the provisions that you mentioned apply in this instance is essentially the factual answer. In terms of the issue of alternatives, it's not a binary argument, in my view, about being for or against the whole concept of the industry of renewables. It's more nuanced than that. It's about this particular project stinks, and that's the issue here. If you want to have an issue about all sorts of energy generation, let's have it, but probably we could have another big meeting just to talk about that. But there are many alternatives to how we generate electricity. The point I was making at the start is we're in a period now where we're diversifying our energy mix, where in the past we've typically had energy generated by one particular technology and source, and now for a number of reasons, largely international and market, we're moving to a number of different sources. And we can have a debate about that if you want, but I don't think that'll assist the purpose of this meeting.
Look, it's a good question what the alternatives are. In in my discussions, I've always believed that if you can't come up with an alternative, they don't complain about the solution that they've currently got. There is alternatives. The world's moving towards them. And the obvious one is small modular reactors. That's exactly where the world's going. I mean, this is not sort of theoretical. It's actually happening. They're actually building them. And if you say, well, where's one? Well, you're about to buy nuclear submarines. They're all got small modular reactors in them. That's how they work. And whether it's NuScale, whether it's Mitsubishi, Hitachi, Rolls-Royce, Skoda, whether it's General Electric, Westinghouse, all these companies, these really silly companies, apparently, they're all developing small modular reactors with completely new technology. Now, the one that Rolls-Royce is developing for the city of Leeds to come online 2029. It is 16.4 metres high, it is 4 metres wide, and Leeds has 503,000 people. So something 16.4 metres high and 4 metres wide is going to do 1.5 Canberras. Now, that you're not going to be able to stop that technology. It's like saying I'm going to stop mobile phones or I'm no longer going to have colour TVs. It's coming, right? And then there's microreactors the size of 2 coffee tables. These things are actually being built. It's not hypothetical. They're being built. And they're in operation already with nuclear submarines. The technology's been around for a while, but now that they're modular and been made in a factory, the technology will race ahead. Now, what do you think will be the decision that the market will make when you can have something 16 metres high, 4 metres wide, or 2,000 or 3,000 wind towers? Which way do you think the market will go? I can tell you right now where it's going to go. They'll go to small modular reactors, zero emissions, and all the wind towers will be obsolete.
I think that was also a good question. Can I just come at it? I want to build a little bit on what Adam was saying. I don't want to enter into a legal debate and things up here, but one of the questions I guess the New South Wales government's got, and we have parked this with the New South Wales government, is how are they going to reconcile under their new Energy Infrastructure Act, under the Res Zone legislation, quite a good and a progressive position on social licence and on community participation. But yet on the other hand, if you take my point of view about the clapped out Planning Act, it doesn't have the same sort of high jump that's built in for it. So this is an issue I think that will come down the pipeline, and it's not here to have it. I mean, I must commend Adam when I look at Ben Lomond and his support there for the community on sort of pushing back where there was no social licence. Oxley is another one, I think Kentucky as well. So I think there's a feeling out there that this particular matter might broker a new appreciation of what social licence might really mean, and I think we should be leveraging off the Energy Infrastructure Act, and I think its requirements in terms of access and what they call LTESs and all of these other provisions that sit within it. So I really think that the days of the old proponent on the snakes and ladders without the snakes, the tick-the-box proposition, this, I'm hoping, is the case that changes the landscape.
Can I just make a comment? John Peatfield from Red 4 New England. Red 4 New England was born out of frustration with these projects popping up everywhere. We started at Somers, we had help from Adam, goes on and on and on. For some reason, the Southwest, we talk about the res zones, the Southwest I think were allocated 2.5 gigawatts, the Central West about 3.5. New England was allocated 8 gigawatts, which in reality is 15 gigawatts, which translates into 2,000 wind towers and 40 million solar panels for New England, 900 of which of the wind towers are in our southern zone, as you can see on the map. The problem is, if we win Winterbourne, it just moves down the road. The deck chairs on the Titanic get moved around, and we go on and bloody on for another 10 years battling these things. One solution that we at Red 4 are pushing is perhaps, and this is a question for Adam as to whether he would consider pushing it, that we reduce the gigawatts for the New England red zone to 3 gigawatts. We've nearly got that underway now. and we could build from the bottom with rooftop solar, small industrial solar, with the abattoirs, the feedlots, the tomato farm, build that, and maybe we'd still only have to find 50 wind towers or a few hundred acres of solar. I think that is about all the burden New England should be expected to carry. So, Adam, what do you think of that as a face-saving thing for everybody? 3 gigawatts for New England.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think I don't know what the magic number should be or would be, but I think the sentiment of what you say is bang on for a whole variety of reasons in terms of at what point does the region reach saturation? What can it feasibly take when you factor in social licence, cumulative impact, transmission infrastructure, and sheer human and physical resources, water, road material, workforce, all of these other factors, there is a limit. But also, the RES itself is going to take years and years and years even before it kicks off. And the landscape, to Barnaby's point, is moving that quickly that events and technology will probably move well beyond, and we get to a point where the 8 gigawatts is superfluous anyway. And I note the Commonwealth have recently released areas for exploration off our coastline around Newcastle and around Wollongong, which I think is smart because many European countries actually use floating turbines and other devices to actually have the electricity generation way out off the continental shelf where the winds are blowing all the time and obviously no one has to look at them. And sure, you've got a bit of expense connecting the underground cables, but all the technology's there because it's happening around the world. So that is happening as well, which was never factored in when the legislation was passed through state parliament and Energy Co determined all these numbers. So I think, yes, you're right. I've certainly had some discussions already with Energy Co about that, and that's basically under consideration at the moment, because what they've worked out is by the time the rubber hits the road for a lot of these things, the technology will have advanced, but there will be a lot of other movement in other areas around the state and in other states now that we're all connected by the giant interconnector. So I can't give you a number now. All I can say to you is it's my view that will, as time goes on, that number will certainly come down. And there's physical limitations that will mean it will anyway, I think. Yeah.
Hi, Barnaby and Adam. My name's Anna Young. So I prepared this earlier with my husband and I've tried to gut it and keep it short, but bear with me for a second. I just wanted to give a quick bit of background before I ask my question to you guys. So my name's Anna Young, my husband's Peter Young, and we have 2 young children, 5 and 2. My husband is a 3rd generation Walcha farmer. Our family goals are clear. We run a grazing property following the footsteps of the amazing job my in-laws have done, and we are multi-generational and absolutely plan to one day pass the land and business on to our children, hopefully each generation passing it on in equal or better condition. As we all know, and it's been said tonight, Walcha is home to prime profitable grazing country and with some of the best land in New South Wales and pristine UNESCO national parks. My family have real and significant concerns about the impact these wind farms will have on our children's ability to farm here in the future. It's clear to us there are so many uncertainties that have been talked through tonight, and we ask the question of how can a decision to proceed be made when these uncertainties are at a potential cost to our children and the future generations of agricultural industry, which is so integral to Australia. It's been said tonight that there is a lot of division in our community because of this issue. And I guess in some ways it really has divided our community. But in other ways, to me, it's actually really clear that the majority still hold a really united position. The recent survey that was conducted at the end of 2022 was answered by over 523 locals. So this is over 25% of our community. And working in a profession that frequently reviews studies, I can safely say that this is a huge sample population for a study. As this study had over 25% of our community respond, they highlighted that over 80% of respondents don't want wind farms and 86% have serious concerns about the lack of consultation and openness in the community. So I guess my question to you guys is, here's a majority kind of view being being shared by us. And I hear you, Barnaby, saying that we need to be political and get active. And I think we are. We're submitting EIS responses. There's been a great lead here by a group that are saying really loudly, this is what our communities needs or wants going forward. What are you guys going to be doing in the political space to rattle cages and get active? Because I think it's really logistically, once again, showing that, like, how do you get this many people to travel down to Canberra? It's an access issue. And we're once again, being regional, put at a bit of a disadvantage.
Look, the reason I'm going to be the honest cynic that I am, right? EISs and all these sort of things, they're all great, but they're really just a pen to put the crazy cattle in, because they'll always work out, if they're motivated that they're going to do it, they'll do it no matter what you put in your submissions. Still do it, absolutely, tick all those boxes. But you've got, as I said, you've got to change the politics. They'd rather you send a submission in online than actually turn up on their front lawn, right? And the way you change the politics is to take the pain closer to them. And the only way you do that is you have to get motivated to actually arrive in Martin Place. You have to get motivated to arrive in Canberra. The other day there was a ring road that they pulled the funding on for Rockhampton. You know what happened? People from Rockhampton turned up in Canberra. And guess what happened? They got their money back. That's what happens when you... And these sort of issues, when the owner-drivers, when they changed the laws for owner-drivers, all the trucks turned up in Canberra and just shut the place down. You know what they did? They changed the laws for owner-drivers. I know it's really hard. It's really hard saying, I'm busy and I can't do it, but you've got to. You've got to if you want to win. Because what they want you to do is get angry in Walcha and stay there. They want you to get angry in Walcha and stay there. They don't want you to go down the road. And what you've got to do in yourself, you've got to get angry enough and motivated enough that says, to hell with that, I'm coming to Sydney. Or to hell with that, I'm going to Canberra. And organising with other people to do it. And when you do that, you change. You make the change. You make the change. But if you play by their rules, if you fill in their forms, if you stay within the guide rails that they've set up for you to stay within, then you're going to end up going exactly to where they want you to go. Remember, the politics is on their side at the moment. Change the politics so it comes onto your side. So you've got to get the young family at some point and say, this is going to be a pain in the neck, it's going to cost us a few dollars, but we're going to get ourselves in a car, we're going to get some other people, we're going to ring up, and we're going to get ourselves down to the front lawn of Canberra. I get myself into trouble for representing your voice. Even tonight, I've been talking to other politicians saying this is another meeting, yet another meeting against wind farms, yet another meeting. Not just this is the only one I've gone to. I could go to this one down at Humelink, I could go to this one down at Burrawa, I go to this one down in Victoria, I go to this one in Cattle Creek, I go to this one down at Crookwell. But see, if you probably realise we're in the opposition now, and so that means not enough people voted for us. So it doesn't matter how crazy I get, because I can't actually change without your support. I can't actually change things. But if I can get enough support of people who are actually motivated enough to get themselves into a position where they organise other people to get onto the front lawn, then I can say, now with that, I can start making a difference.
I was just going to only add to that, Anna, and say that in my view and in my experience in local government and state parliament, you've got to cover all of your bases. You've got to get active and get angry, turn up in meetings like this. You've got to rise above, go the high road, not the low road, in terms of the proponent is doing the bare minimum, the proponent is cutting corners on proper consultation, on attracting a social licence. But you also have to get angry, but be respectful, but also you're doing the right thing, in my view, in poking holes, the obvious, and highlighting the obvious flaws in the technical basis of what they're trying to foist onto this community. And yes, you've got to work the political angle, but we have to work within also acknowledging the fact that the determining factor here, the decision will be made based on the New South Wales Environment Planning and Assessment Act 1979, and those decisions are made by independent planning commissioners that sure can be influenced strongly by public opinion. In fact, the law requires that they take into account community sentiment and community opinion, but they're also got an obligation legally to look at the actual substance of the proposal. And so you've got to work hard on the community side, and that's my job, Barnaby's job, your local state member's job at the moment, member for Tamworth, but you've also got to work the substance, the issue of where are all these workers going to come from, where are they going to live, where's the water going to come from, how are you going to transport the stuff here, what are you going to do to make sure you don't further endanger all of the wildlife, how can you remove all of those trees, what about the erosion, what about those, yeah, the what are you doing when you reach the end of the project to decommission, all of those legitimate issues. The Planning Commission, the Department of Planning have to, by law, assess those things. So you have to address those, and you will win the argument because you win the politics, you win the community sentiment, but you beat them also on the actual substance of their proposal. And I think you will do that, because I don't see how a rational person can look at what you've already put together as a community and what's being proposed and not come down on your side stick together. So you've got to do everything.
Just in the essence of time, I think that's a really good point to leave this evening. We can certainly have a beer and a mingle and support the bowling club if that's what we all desire. But I'd really like to thank Mark, Adam and Barnaby for their attendance this evening. I'd like to thank the Hef for his input, because I think it gave it a bit of a comical but certainly factual end. And I'd also like to thank the community for your respect of each other. We are a great community. We can get through this. And as the survey says, let's be one voice. Let's be one voice, fill in our submissions, and then move forward. Yep. There's certainly, I think Simone and Kate are up the back, Cam and Rach are up the front. For those that want to fill in a submission now, we're here to help. For those that have already done theirs, you get the bonus of going to the bar.